my pleasure to introduce our speaker this evening, Frank Anderson. Frank was actually born in the Philippines. His dad was in the war over there and stayed around working in the lumber business before Frank and the family moved back to Wisconsin at the age of 12. Now, Frank is a writer, a director, a stop-motion animator. I hope he has some time during his presentation to explain to us what a stop-motion animator is, and a musician. A former ranch hand and longtime animator and animation director, he directed the feature film The Life of Riley in 2006. He created visuals for clients such as Turner Classic Movies and the Noggin Network. He backed up numerous country artists on pedal steel guitar and was a session musician at Smart Studios in Madison in the 90s. He taught animation at the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design and sequential art as an adjunct professor at Lawrence University. He's the creator and author of Wisconsinology.com and is currently working with the September Club in Los Angeles as a project developer. He writes for several sites and continues to direct and animate. And finally, he created the logo for the Wisconsin Timber Rattlers. So please, a warm welcome for Frank Anderson.
It's so nice to see so many people. Thank you for coming here tonight. Before I start, how many Catholics? Good. I was halfway around the world. I was baptized by a wandering Jesuit, but I never followed through after that. One more note as I speak. The 1900 to 1940 was considered the bad old days for mental health, right? For detecting and understanding mental health. But don't get it wrong that they did not know that. In all the articles and periodicals that I've combed through about Father Theo and exorcism, they're always questioning the behavior of the demoniac, the person being exorcised, as being some kind of understandable mental health issue that we'll only know about in the future. So they're not so much in the Dark Ages. And the Catholic Church is on board with that at that time. And it's kind of funny because they're kind of not on board with that now. Exorcisms are way up, and they, yes. Well, anyway, I will begin my talk. I would like to start in the year 1926 because it brings together two remarkable Appleton personalities. In 1926, spiritualism, which is the belief that you can speak to your loved ones communicate with your loved ones after they are gone, was rampant in Wisconsin. We had a spiritualist institute, the only one in the world, in Whitewater, and because we were before air conditioning, we were America's cooler. People came here more than today to be in the North Woods, so there were spiritualist retreats all over Wisconsin. The death toll from World War I, I'm good. Is there a bubbler around here? Oh, there. Thank you. World War I and the Spanish flu had a terrible death toll, especially for Americans. The Spanish flu was a disaster. And people, like all wars, like the Civil War, especially when spiritualism grew, this belief exploded after 1918. So spiritualism was rampant. Reports of ghosts and apparitions and demonic possession went along with it. most of the mediums who were practicing spiritualism, I'd say all of them, were fraudulent. It was a huge industry, and they were bilking a lot of people out of a lot of money, and they had the support of many members of Congress. The number one enemy of the spiritualists, who was determined to bring them down, Houdini. And in 1926, the last year of his life, he had spent a fortune. He had agents everywhere. He was debunking every spiritualist medium who popped up. He didn't care if it was a sideshow trick. In other words, if you did not charge money. He didn't care. That's fine. He did that once in his career. But if you were charging a lot of money for someone to speak to their dead loved ones, he jumped in. And at this point, he was in Chicago. In the spring of 1926, the Amro Phantom case sprung up. I'm going to read a newspaper clipping about the Amro Phantom. Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Marie Mayburn, 11-year-old foster daughter and only child of a farmer living in the vicinity of Delhi, Wisconsin. Who knows Delhi, Wisconsin? Excellent. It's a ghost town. In other words, they live near Amro. Yeah. Has been the center of much discussion in this community during the last 3 months. Marie may be playing, as normal children play, when a shrill whistle announces the beginning of the many strange manifestations, according to those who have witnessed them. The first of these strange performances occurred in the farm home of her foster parents on Christmas Day. Since that time, in 4 different houses where the child has been taken, witnesses say strange noises have been heard. So, as this case progressed, there were fears that she was possessed. Now, I hope you paid attention to the fact that people heard things wherever she went. Houdini was performing in Chicago at that very moment. A reporter for the Oshkosh Northwestern asked the question, would one of our state's 2 great experts on this subject intervene? One being Houdini, the other being Father Theophilus Riesinger from Appleton. They both did. Houdini solved it in 1 hour. He was smoking a cigar and resting on a couch. He read the entire case of Marie Mayburn, and he said, I will give them $10,000 that they can give to the charity of their choice if I don't figure out the case the moment I arrive in Amro. Well, that ended it. Houdini figured out that the little girl had a clever defect in her jaw, in her teeth. When she drew her breath in, like this, it created an incredible shrill whistle. So this whistle announced every event that happened. So once the whistle came, people freaked out, got into their supernatural mode, and then she could do the rest of the work, which is throw toys around or drop things that she had in her pocket to make noise. To confirm Houdini's assumption, Father Theophilus Riesinger went down to Mercy Hospital in Oshkosh, and he gave her his test. Now, his method was he would say 2 short prayers. Any suspected demoniac got the same treatment from Father Riesinger. Within 5 minutes, Father Riesinger said, nah, she's not possessed, I'm leaving. So that ended. I'm going to give you a quick, and I mean quick, biography of Father Theo. Father Theophilus was born in Stelze, Bavaria, 1868. At age 21, he entered a monastery not far from his home. He dropped out. He went back to school. He emigrated to the United States. He re-entered the Capuchin order in 1892. In 1899, he completed his studies for priesthood at a monastery, St. Francis Monastery in Milwaukee, and he was ordained there. After a succession of churches in Brooklyn, Manhattan, and New York City, he was assigned in 1912, at age 40, to St. Joseph's Parish in Appleton. And there he remained with 2 short stints at the monastery, St. Anthony Monastery in Marathon, Wisconsin. He was there to help them build the cemetery for the first time. This is Houdini's motto, his motto. I fake, so do all others. I love that. That's why he's my hero. To me, everybody and everything is show business. Everybody's in show business. They can deny it, but they are. Once people record you, once you're in the papers, once you're on film or tape, you're in show business. And how you present yourself, well, you alter it. I'm altering it right now because I know 2 cameras are on. In 1973, something happened that shook the world. This happened in 1973, and this shook the world. My sister-in-law, in 1973, was in college, and she went to see The Exorcist. She's a Lutheran. She came home, yeah, I know. She came home, a little statue of, a plastic statue of Jesus she had on the shelf in her bedroom, fell after a sharp jar hit her house. What happened was there was an earthquake in southern Illinois, and we felt it all through Wisconsin. I remember that earthquake. It was one hard hit, and things went blah, 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 like that. Anyway, she didn't know that, and she nearly switched religions the next day. The Exorcist filled the pews, got people interested in relics, prophecies, religious arcana, and the physical details of that book were wrongly attributed to a case from Baltimore and St. Louis involving a certain Roland Doe, fake name. That's all the press talked about. If you ever saw The Exorcist, it's a blow-by-blow depiction of Father Theo's most famous exorcism. The Roland Doe case that was cited during The Exorcist was rife with misinformation. Its various sources completely suspect. It was never told the same way twice. Every famous author, quote, author or scholar who recounted it was wrong. They based their information on things that never happened. I'll recite what happened briefly. Roland was an only child whose only friends were the adults in his house. He was 14. He happened to have an Aunt Harriet. She was a spiritualist. She introduced Roland to a Ouija board, big bugaboo these days. Her early death crushed Roland and set off a series of strange events. The family experienced noises, furniture moving, vases flying whenever the boy was nearby. You know who's doing it. They reported the events to their family pastor, a Lutheran whose lifelong obsession was parapsychology. Do you see where this is going? It's just doubling down as it moves along with one vested interest after another. He tells them, I'm a Lutheran, we don't do this. You've got to bring Catholics in. So an army of Jesuits arrive, and I mean an army. And they begin the exorcism in Cottage City, Maryland. Young Roland is a difficult case. He basically punches everybody who gets near him. He was just a deeply disturbed, troubled boy. Father Walter Halloran, finally, a voice of reason, a Jesuit from Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, was the last living witness of the exorcism of Roland Doe. He considered Roland a very disturbed and very strong 14-year-old outcast. Father Halloran would later become a chaplain in Vietnam who parachuted into battle on numerous occasions to administer comfort and first aid to wounded and dying soldiers. He was a classic Jesuit, always skeptical, always looking for a practical solution. How many Jesuits does it take to screw in a light bulb? He already screwed it in last week and he left some extras in the closet. Looking back, Father Halloran said, I never made an absolute statement on the exorcism of Roland Doe because I didn't feel I was qualified. That's great. To a friend, he admitted, I think there was a lot of play acting going on. In the end, the story of the exorcism of Roland Doe was mistold again and again, each time the teller manipulated the facts to fit their own agenda. The Catholic rite of exorcism. Oh, by the way, that's the real star of The Exorcist, the Babylonian demon Pazuzu. He appeared in the sequel. This guy's a star. He was not in Exorcist 3, and I think he should talk to his agent about that. The Catholic rite of exorcism. Francisco Goya painted that, a good Catholic. Exorcism in the Catholic Church is a formal rite. The New Testament is the beginning of that rite. And Jesus is considered the first exorcist, although exorcisms are in all cultures and have existed forever. There are 4 types of demonic activity: mental attacks called obsessions, physical attacks called vexations, and infestations of locations, objects, weird dolls. These first 3 require prayers, just prayers. They're considered minor exorcisms. The rarest of all cases is demonic possession. Today, in the Catholic Church, 1 out of every 5,000 cases is investigated, and maybe they'll do an exorcism. There are 125 exorcists in the Catholic Church. For an exorcist, a real case of demonic possession requires tremendous physical and mental stamina. Father Theo had both. The following description of Father Theo was from a much circulated interview that was done at the old priory at St. Joseph's Church in Appleton. Does anyone here remember the old priory? Was it attached to St. Joseph, or was it a separate building? Yeah. The reporter describes the meeting room as being tiny, the reception room. It is a strange experience to interview the scholarly Father Theophilus in 1936, in the supposed era of rational thought. To sit across the table from a sensible-looking old gentleman with a parted white beard and a businessman's black overcoat, and to talk about such faraway things as exorcisms and possessions is very odd. There was a kind of embarrassment in asking this old priest just what he then said to Beelzebub or inquired of Satan. It was like listening to the story of a good fight between 2 determined persons, with the right the victor. This is Father Theophilus being interviewed. And these are, the first subject is, few are possessed. Hundreds of persons have been sent to me by priests and laymen who believe that there was a possession. Usually, I find otherwise. I give a great deal of study to a case before I am willing to admit that there is a possession. You cannot imagine the terrible symptoms and feelings that possessed people have. Strange cats and dogs talk to them in the night. I thought that was funny. They cannot perform their religious duties. They are kept away from the sacraments, and they are unhappy. I admit these symptoms look like hysteria and insanity, but that is not the case. Through exorcism, through prayers of the church, we can force their devils to talk. When the devils are men, they speak with men's voices. If they are women, they speak with women's voices. I would always prefer to work in secret, but sometimes the devils make such a howl that I cannot keep it quiet. He gave a talk to the Appleton Rotary Club at that time, and the Rotary Club was so interested, they wanted to send their delegation along to accompany Father Theo on one of his exorcisms, and he had to very politely tell them, no, you cannot do that. It is interesting that during Father Theo's time, exorcism was a source of embarrassment to the Catholic Church. They wanted to be viewed then as vital to the fast-changing times and the modern world that was created between 1870 and 1940. A world that changed more than ever, more than today. That time saw more change. Today, the church has changed its mind about exorcisms. The number of exorcists has increased. And since the pandemic began, the number of requests for exorcism, just like the number of mental health cases, has exploded. Theo in Appleton. Father Theophilus arrived in Appleton to find a very Catholic city set in a very Catholic region. Now, I'm not from here. And people I met from here thought that their being Catholic in a Catholic community in America, a dense Catholic community, Nina Menasha, Appleton, Milwaukee, all the way down the line, the Holy Road over there, they thought that was normal. So when I told them the number one enemy of the Ku Klux Klan revival of the 1920s, the number one enemy was Catholics. Well, no, that's not true. I never heard such a thing. They say things like that. But as an outsider, I come from a Lutheran Norwegian town. To move up here, that's culture shock. It is shockingly different. And until you do so, where you think people in Madison think they're the center of the world, but I have news for them. This is the center of the world. Father Theo, so he found in Appleton loaded with societies and social clubs, and he was such a good public speaker, they wanted him to talk. And Father Theo would talk about anything, and I mean anything. Read that. Can you read that? Father Theophilus of St. Joseph Church gave a talk on birth control at the meeting, and a contribution was made to the Boy Scouts. Here is by the way, he was in the office of missions as one of his jobs, which meant he went far and wide to Catholic churches to speak. He could end up in Cadott, Wisconsin. Another weekend, he'd be in Davenport, he'd be in Crofton. He was always on the move. The Appleton train station, which, by the way, my father said was the greatest thing ever. You could go anywhere you wanted, like that, 3 times a day, was practically his home. I have read descriptions of him just sitting there waiting for a train. Here is a description of Father Theo. I was on the missions with Father Theo for 22 years. He was always considerate of the failings and shortcomings of others. His correction was fatherly, kind, and sincere. He always had an encouraging word and rejoiced in others' successes. He was ever ready to substitute for or take over the work of any other. In his prime, he preached 5, even 7 times a day without complaint, and he never missed saying his breviary, rosary, or stations every day. While traveling and in the rectory, he was a pleasant companion. He was an interesting, this is a good point, a very interesting entertainer, and well-liked by priests and people. Okay, this is the meat of the thing. I hope you're ready. This is the blood and guts part. That's Father Joseph Steiger from Earling, Iowa. He assisted Father Theophilus and his sister assisted in the greatest exorcism case in American history, the exorcism of Emma Schmidt. We don't know who Emma Schmidt is. It took me a lot of time for me to find that she was even named Emma Schmidt. The exorcism was performed at a convent in Earling, Iowa. It was a long and brutal affair, performed in 3 stages over a period of 3 months, a total of 23 days. Little is known of Emma Schmidt. A document of this case, a 40-page pamphlet published in the 1930s called Begone Satan, refers to her as Anna Eklund, a cover name to protect her identity. She appears as Mary X in another publication, an account written by Father F.J. Bunsey, oh, help me with this, called The Earling Possession Case, an exposition of the exorcism of Mary, a demoniac and certain marvelous revelations foretelling the near advent of the Antichrist and the persecution of the church in the years 1952 to 1955. Obviously not a bestseller. It was published in 1934 and is supposedly taken directly from the notes of Father Theo. Well, that's probably not true. Father Theo's notes, well, they're not available to us. They're in the Vatican. Begone Satan was initially distributed to seminaries around the United States. It became a minor sensation in the Catholic world, popular to the point that its key figure, Father Riesinger, was mentioned in Time magazine and received numerous celebrity visitors in Appleton. People always came knocking on his door. Father Theo, who had stopped performing exorcisms by that time, was a celebrity and he was enjoying it. During the exorcism, there was a lot of Catholic boilerplate being discussed by the many demons and with the exorcist. The demons get very involved, according to these 2 authors, in the minutiae of points of order, rules, hierarchy, protocol. At times, Lucifer and his lieutenants and acolytes come off more like officious bureaucrats rather than fearsome fallen angels or demons. They are completely versed in church rules, which is shook me, and strangely obedient to them. And they love to argue. That's all they do is argue. The author of Begone Satan, Father Vogl, interviewed the people who were directly involved in the case. Father Joseph Steiger is the main witness. He is the saddest figure of this entire story, and you'll find out why. Emma Schmidt was 46 years old in 1928. She was born in 1882. Her mother died when she was small. She was raised by an abusive father named Jacob and his mysterious mistress, someone who may not have existed at all, or someone who was her aunt or her sister. Her father, Jacob, it is said, sold her soul to the devil. The name of this person is Mina, this mother, mistress, whatever. In the second, Emma Schmidt had been exorcised before. We think 2 times total, but I think 3. Her entire life is very sad. She's beset by horrible mental problems. It is said Emma was a serious and devout Catholic until the age 14. Things changed. Episodes of hysteria and strange behavior followed. She heard voices. She's reported to abhor all things of a religious nature. She attacked a priest who blessed her. Objects near her moved on their own, and she was known to purr and hiss like a cat. Father Theophilus arranged to have the exorcism performed at a Franciscan convent near Earling, Iowa, which is a small town near the Nebraska border. Emma was laid upon a mattress in an iron-framed bed. Two nuns who are described as sturdy held her arms down on each side. A third stood by. Joseph Steiger and Father Theo's and Joseph's housekeeper, Teresa Wegerer, were there as well. Father Theo began his prayers. As the prayers began, Emma sank into a deep unconscious state. She would remain in that state for the next month. Her eyes were shut so tightly that they could not be forced open. It was at this point that a hair-raising scene occurred, almost right away. With lightning speed, the possessed dislodged herself from her bed and from the hands of her bodyguards. Her body, carried through the air, landed high above the door of the room and clung to the wall opposite with a tenacious grip. All present were struck with a trembling fear. Father Theophilus alone kept his peace. We are now in a place where gravity does not matter. We are also in a place where the exorcist, as I mentioned before, blow by blow, begins to echo our tale. With great effort, these nuns just pulled Emma back down and placed her on the bed. Immediately, she began to howl. Like a pack of wild beasts let loose in many voices, this howling is heard far from the convent. People in the town, I don't believe this, by the way, report hearing the howling packs. And it is sometimes answered. A loud, shrill voice rent the air, and as though it were far off, somewhere in the desert. Quote, "This struck terrible fear and penetrated the marrow of everyone's bones." In the ensuing days, Emma, and remember she's in a subconscious state, with her eyes shut tightly, would vomit, defecate frequently. And I quote, "In quantities that were, humanly speaking, impossible. 30 buckets a day were continually being filled and emptied. And bear in mind, she's not eating. A spoonful of water a day. She would need an IV. The stench was intolerable. Flies, mosquitoes appeared everywhere. Swarms would appear and suddenly vanish. Her lips expanded to the size of a hand, then would quickly again deflate. Her head changed shape. And I quote, her pale, death-like, emaciated head took on the shape of a water pitcher. She levitates. She is violently averse to holy water and holy symbols. She knows hidden things. She knows everybody's secret. She knows the most private thing everyone would not want the others to know. And she begins to recite all of their sins, one by one. Imagine that. She predicts the immediate future near-fatal car wreck that nearly took the life of Reverend Joseph Steiger. He was shaken but not physically injured. He returned to the convent after the accident and was immediately confronted by Emma. She said, "What about your new car, that dandy auto, which was just smashed to smithereens?" She asks. She seemed to relish targeting Steiger, who admittedly does not have the strength and iron will of Father Theo. I mean, he looks haunted there, right? This is after the exorcism. He is haunted. As the days progress, it becomes clear that Emma Schmidt is possessed by many demons, and Father Theophilus makes them all reveal their names. There is Beelzebub. There is Judas. It is best described, Beelzebub is best described as Lucifer's chief lieutenant, and he's also known as Lord of the Flies. But also, there is her father, Jacob, and his witch mistress, her aunt, whatever, Mina, who we soon learn is complicit with Jacob in selling Mina's soul to the devil. Judas Iscariot makes a very star-studded appearance, and there are numerous lesser demons. These demons speak in all languages. Father Theo, lucky for us, is a great linguist, and he continually changes language with the demons during the exorcism. Among the languages that were spoken at the exorcism of Emma Schmidt, German, Latin, Polish, Italian. Pretty standard around this area at that time, really. 60% of Wisconsin spoke another language at home at night in the year 1920. The New York Times declared this state the most foreign state it had ever seen. It is the map of old pre-war Europe transplanted to a place right here. And it was stunning. When I moved to Deerfield, Wisconsin, I was 12, right? I thought people spoke English. I arrive in a room. My grandfather's there. He's speaking Norwegian. What the hell, you know? I just came from somewhere where you got around with Spanish and Tagalog and a little bit of English. This was shocking to me. And then as I traveled around Wisconsin, all of our communities are so fascinating. Everyone there is from Belgium. Everyone there is from Lithuania. Everyone there is from Holland. I'm pointing in the right direction, aren't I? There we go. There we go. By December 23rd, 1928, Father Theophilus has been awake and performing the rite of exorcism for 3 consecutive days and nights. It ends with a flurry of prayers and commands from Father Theophilus and the words, "Satan, be gone." Emma Schmidt straightened up in bed, opened her eyes for the first time since September. Father Theophilus returned to Appleton. He was fine. He was ready for more. He resumed his busy daily schedule. All the nuns at the Erling exorcism requested transfers and were gone within a year. Little is known of what happened to Emma. It is said she returned to Erling every Thanksgiving to make a novena. And she is described in some documents as being in peace and in others as being still having the same problems and still being mentally beset. Someone who was not at peace and never would be at peace again was Reverend Joseph Steiger, our main witness. Everything I told you is what he said. His remaining years are haunted. His housekeeper, Teresa Wegerer, an eyewitness to these events, said these words during a later interview. "I witnessed the entire exorcism of the Erling possession case, and I can truthfully say that the facts mentioned in Begone Satan are correct. And some of the scenes were even more frightful than described in the booklet. There's not the slightest doubt in my mind that devils were present, and I will never forget those horrible scenes, vile, filthy, and dirty as long as I live." Steger passed away in 1938, 10 years after the exorcism. He was no longer the bright-eyed man who drove his brand new car to pick up his dear friend, Father Theophilus, at the railway station in Iowa in the fall of 1928. Father Theo's now a celebrity of some note. People do know who he is. He died 1 month, November 9th, 1941, just before World War II. He was assisting in a service at St. Mary's in Menasha. By the way, George Liberace was baptized there. Does anyone know? He died at he had a heart attack at 7:15. He passed away later at St. Elizabeth's, 3 p.m. here in Appleton. The story of Father Theo gradually disappeared. He was kind of forgotten. And the Erling exorcism was as well. But William Peter Blatty, the author of The Exorcist, found it and used it as part of his research for his best-selling book. When the movie came out, Father Theo was back. You can see him. He's buried at the priest's circle at St. Joseph's Cemetery, between Riverside Cemetery and the Refuge, formerly Mount Alverno Retreat, which he helped build, by the way. Well, he says so, but I think he was a little past his prime by then. So I would suggest go visiting him. Ever since I've been talking about him in my Wisconsinology.com and other venues where I appear, he's had quite a few visitors. And people have inquired of me. I don't know if I'm the expert on the case, but I can say this. I've read everything I can, and I've read all the books, and I've read all the research. I've read scholarly papers, and they all disagree with one another. Bill Hendrick. We have a Father Theo, I would say expert. I just read his stuff with us, and he gave me some good things. He wrote the description of Father Theo in Find a Grave. So if you look him up online in Find a Grave, you'll find way more detailed than I've ever seen description of the life of Father Theo. Thank you, Bill, for that. Thank you so much, everybody.